I am product manager at Server Density. I like to call myself a HumanOps champion, talking about the human elements of DevOps, and I'm a bit of a craft beer nerd. So if you want to talk to me afterwards, talk to me about monitoring, alerting, and the problems you face as an on-call engineer. Talk to me about the human aspects of doing DevOps, and if you want to talk to me about my favourite hops, that's okay too. So I wanted to start my talk tonight by sharing with you one of my greatest achievements to date. I have no unread messages in my inbox. I know, right? Success is mine. Achievement unlocked. No unread messages. It sounds funny, but how many of us have celebrated these small achievements, done a little lap of honour around the office because you've got through your inbox? But it's not funny in a way that our inbox is dictating our jobs in this way. No one's ever going to write a job spec that says, I want to hire an awesome engineer and they must be prepared to spend 50% of their time reading and responding to email. No one's ever going to say that. No one's ever going to sit you down in your performance review and say, well, actually, you know what, at this company, we like to check our email at least 11 times every hour. But that's exactly what people do. People check their email, on average, 11 times every hour. And I find that quite shocking. But I do it myself, and I can completely relate to it. And it's not just email that's the problem. Email's been around for a while, and email is something we understand really well. But we've got so many apps now that are competing for our attention. We've got Slack, we've got iMessages, we've got Twitter, we've got Snapchat, we've got Instagram, we've got HipChat. We're doing chat-ops, so you know we're always connected through this digital media. And I don't know about you, but I've had these funny moments in my career where I've got to the end of my day and I thought to myself, I haven't actually started my real work yet. I've got to the end of my day and I'm like, oh my god, the thing that this company is actually paying me to do, I haven't done anything because I'm doing this busy work. Instead, I'm sort of over-communicating and fielding messages from left, right, and centre. And the thing about all of these notifications and all of these interruptions that are competing for our attention all day, every day, day in, day out, these are disrupting the way our brains work, and no one is safe from this type of digital disruption. This is the digital disruption of our minds and our brains. So today I'm going to talk about that subject. I'm going to talk about information overload, interruptions, what we can do to help ourselves deal with this better, and what we can do to help each other. So the average person checks their phone 110 times a day. But I don't think we're that average in this room. I actually think we're probably a lot worse than this. But this is the average, 110, which is quite a lot, actually. The average person, again, is interrupted 11 times an hour by digital notifications. And one study showed that as employees, we generally experience only 3 minutes of uninterrupted focus at any one time. And when we are interrupted, it takes us about 23 minutes to regain focus and go back to the task that we were originally trying to complete. So it makes you wonder, how does anything ever get done in this environment? And I've been wondering that for a while, which is why I put together this talk. The other side of it is that actually the work that we do as developers and engineers is often complex, technical, problem solving. This is what we're paid to do. So it's not surprising that developers really, really hate interruptions. And I think Joel Spolsky from Stack Overflow puts this really well. Developers need to concentrate. And I'd extend this to anyone who's doing an engineering or a complex technical role. Developers need to concentrate. The more things that you can keep in your head at once, the faster you can code by orders of magnitude. Can anyone relate to that? Has anyone ever had one of those moments in the office where you're dealing with a problem-solving task, and you've got this thread of an idea, and it's not quite fully formed yet, and you're thinking it through, and then bam, you get an email or you get a notification, something comes along and bulldozes your attention, and it takes you 5 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes to get back to that point you were at before when you were on the cusp of solving this problem. And it's wildly frustrating, isn't it? And as a programmer, one particular study found that you're likely to get just one uninterrupted 2-hour session of programming every day. And I think I've worked in organisations where it was a lot worse than this, actually. But imagine that, so you've got a job in front of you and maybe it will take 10 hours. But actually you're only going to get 2 hours of productivity every day. So that 10-hour task is going to take you a whole week to complete because of other issues and interruptions in your environment affecting you. And think about multitasking and this connectedness and trying to do everything at once is that it's really, really not good for you. The cognitive losses from multitasking are greater than the cognitive losses from smoking weed. You might as well be sat at your desk trying to program smoking a joint if you're trying to do email and Slack and Twitter all at the same time. When you realise that, you're like, okay, why am I doing this? But the interesting thing about multitasking is that it feels really productive. You're going to feel great if you're multitasking. You're doing everything at once and you're going to feel wildly successful because your brain is a dopamine addict. So every time you do a little small task like replying to an instant message, you're going to get that little kick of dopamine in your head that tells you you're doing well. It's a little reward for completing that small task, even though it wasn't the most important task at hand. So the little addict in your head wants the dopamine, and we need to control this little addict. So I'm going to talk about that more later. But the other thing about multitasking is it increases the production of stress hormones. So the two key stress hormones are cortisol and adrenaline. And when your brain gets awash with these hormones, it actually clouds your thinking. And it inhibits your ability to think clearly. And again, that doesn't sound like the greatest state of mind to be in when you're trying to solve complex technical problems, does it? So we need to do something about this. And if multitasking wasn't bad enough, and if interruptions coming at you from the outside wasn't bad enough, our brain does this thing called self-interruption. So the saying goes that neurons that fire together wire together. And interruption is like a bad habit. The more you're interrupted from the outside, the more you're likely to then interrupt yourself. So maybe you've gone to have a look at your inbox even though you know there are no email messages. Maybe you've picked up your phone even though you know it hasn't buzzed and there's no new notifications. Maybe you've just spontaneously got up to go and get another coffee. Self-interruption is a thing. Thank you, brain. And the interesting thing about self-interruption is that it increases proportionally to the amount of external interruption that you experience. So the more you're interrupted by other people, the more you are then going to interrupt yourself during the following hour of work. And you can think about this the other way around as well. So the more quick instant messages you send off, the more fire and forget emails, the more you're interrupting other people and the more they are then going to interrupt themselves during their next hour of work. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle. But this actually isn't a talk about productivity. So we're not getting a lot done, and that doesn't feel great, but there are bigger issues here, and they go a lot deeper than just having a few unread messages and having a pang of jealousy when you see someone's amazing holiday photos on Facebook. Email apnea is a thing. Does anyone know what it is? Actually, no? Email apnea, or more accurately, application apnea, is the behavior of shallow breathing or holding your breath while you're doing email or working at a screen. The thing about email or application apnea is that 80% of us have been observed to do this. And when we have irregular breathing, when we're affected sort of physiologically like that, it increases our stress levels. We've already discussed how good that is. It affects our emotional well-being, and obviously it's going to impact our ability to work effectively. You may not have noticed yourself doing this, but when I found out, I've certainly noticed myself doing this since, which is really fascinating. And also, there's the sleep. There's the sleep issue, actually. I love sleeping. Sleeping is great. I'm a big fan of sleep. But so many of us are remaining connected during the night. It's actually been shown that 1/3 of UK adults will check their mobile phone during the night when they're supposed to be asleep. This isn't like before bed, this isn't when they get up in the morning, this is during the night. Maybe they've gone through a sleep cycle, they've sort of come round. People are reaching for their phones at that point in time in the middle of the night, which is sort of fascinating behaviour, but something I can completely relate to. 10% of us check our phones as soon as we wake up before we do anything else, and 52% of us are going to check our phone within 15 minutes. Reading from a light-emitting device, such as a smartphone or a tablet just before bed, will actually decrease the production of melatonin, which is the hormone that you need in your body to regulate your sleep. So not only will it be more difficult for you to get to sleep when you want to go, you're not going to have as good quality sleep when you actually fall. And I don't think it needs to be said, but sleep is really important. Lack of sleep has been linked to obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, amongst other sort of physical ailments. And there's a lot of psychological sort of problems that come with this hyper-connectedness that we're existing within at the moment as well. FOMO. Does anyone know what FOMO is? Yes? Yeah?
Fear of missing out.
Yes, it's the fear of missing out. So one of the big sort of motivators for us as individuals to be so hyper-connected all of the time is that we're scared that we're going to miss something really important. That's fear of missing out. We can suffer from anxiety as well. How many of you would be super anxious and stressed if I told you that you couldn't have the internet for a day? Yeah. It's got to that point, isn't it? Like, well, all of us, we just can't cope anymore from disconnecting. And the internet is also really good at showing us how great other people are, which can feed into an imposter syndrome. It's really good at demonstrating to us all the things we don't know, which we're inclined to focus on more than the things that we do know, that is sort of validated through that. And of course, it feeds into having like a feeling that you've lost control. So if you're letting these notifications and interruptions dictate where your attention and your focus is, you can feel like you've lost control of that aspect of yourself. And feelings of loss of control can contribute to burnout. Information overload itself can contribute hugely to burnout. The feeling that you just cannot keep up. So I'm sort of here to say, that's okay, people. Like, you're not expected to. Nobody can keep up anymore, and that's all right. So you know what I'm going to say now. I'm going to say, you know, we're here tonight to listen to talks. We're not here to check Twitter. We're not here to check our email. I'm going to ask you, very nicely and politely, to please put away your devices. Yeah. Yeah, please. So we're going to experience a little bit of FOMO together. This talk is about 15 minutes long until the end. You can do this. We're just going to see how that feels, and maybe talk about that after, and it'll be really interesting. So now that I've got your full attention, it seems like a really good time to talk a bit of neuroscience with you. So we're going to talk about brains and how they work. If the human brain was so simple that we could understand it, we would be so simple that we couldn't. I say that because I'm not a neuroscientist, so I'm going to keep this really, really high level because it's the only level at which I understand it. But it helped me to understand why I was behaving the way I was with technology. We're going to start by talking about the attentional system. There are basically 4 key components to the attentional system. We've got the attentional filter, the central executive mode, mind-wandering mode, and the attentional switch. All of these work together to dictate what your brain is thinking about at any time. The attentional filter takes all of the input from the external world and decides for you what is important. So you're probably not thinking about what the temperature in the room is right now, but if it shot up 10 degrees in the next minute, your attentional filter will probably bring that into focus in your conscious mind. When you receive an email or you feel a buzz in your pocket, what do you think your attentional filter is doing? It's bringing that to the surface into your conscious mind. The central executive is the supervisory system that allows you to direct your own thinking. So sometimes this is called top-down thinking. So this is when you decide what you're going to think about and you purposefully concentrate on a task, which is the exact opposite to mind-wandering. So mind-wandering is when you let your thoughts just sort of take their own path. And they're both incredibly important. Mind-wandering has been shown to improve your creativity and empathy, whereas clearly your central executive is what you need for problem solving and thinking logically through a situation. Mind-wandering is what you might have experienced when you're driving. Have you ever driven on a long journey, or you've got into such a routine on your commute that you don't actually remember any part of it, except for the fact that you're going into something in your mind? That's what's happening when you're doing mind-wandering. And finally, we have the attentional switch, which is a little part of your brain called the insula. And that decides when you're going to switch between all of these different modes. And the sad thing about your poor little attentional switch is it gets really tired. So you can actually wear out your attentional switch. The more you switch between tasks constantly, your attentional switch gets tired. And actually this can cause kind of physical impacts such as feelings of dizziness. So if you're really hammering that attentional switch, it's going to make you feel not very great about yourself. You're not going to be at your best for sure. So now we understand a little bit more about the attentional system. You can imagine what happens when we're interrupted by a notification. The attentional filter is going to kick in and it's going to bring it into your conscious mind. You're then going to engage the central executive mode that's going to have to make a decision at that point. Even if you don't go and look at it, you're making a decision not to go and look at it at that time. And finally, the more we have to do this, the more notifications come in, the more we have to make these decisions, the more we're having to engage that central executive mode to make a decision not to look at the email, the more we're going to wear out our attentional switch, which is going to make us feel not very nice. And the thing about the attentional filter is that it has a bias for novelty. So something new in your environment, such as a new email or a new object, a different color or whatever, can hijack your attentional filter and grab your attention, which is probably why you're thinking about alpacas and how they get depressed right now, instead of listening to why the attentional filter has a novelty bias. So I'll say it again really briefly. We have a novelty bias. So shiny new things in our environment are going to make us curious. And you can imagine that this was a real advantage when we were like hunter-gatherers in the wild. Oh, here's a new thing. I need to explore it. I need to understand it. What is this? What is this? And is it going to threaten me in my existence? Not so much. Not so much for notifications. They're not threatening your existence most of the time. But the same processes are engaged. The curiosity kicks in and your attentional filter will really want to go and investigate that new thing. I'm just going to leave this here actually, because I think this is quite a shocking stat. Having received a new email, there is a 40% chance that you're going to open that email within 3 seconds. Have more self-control, please. And we also have this thing called the completion bias. So this is our little dopamine addict in our brain again that's going to reward us for completing a job regardless of the importance of that job. This is the bias within our brains that's going to make us want to respond to all our email before we do anything else. It's going to want us to do all of the small little easy tasks because checking them off the list feels like we're making real progress, when actually the really important work is getting left by the wayside. And the thing about our concentration is it's not an endless resource. Our focus is finite. The brain is only about 2% of the weight of your whole body, but it burns through 20 to 30% of the calories that you consume. And it's this oxygenated glucose in your blood that fuels the brain. And your brain can get depleted in its key resources. It can get tired. So the more you use your brain for things that are unimportant, the less able you're going to focus on the things that are actually important, that you do want to be working on. So I'm going to move on to some more slightly positive notes, because there are things that we can do to help each other and to help ourselves get better at this. There's this thing called configuration that you might have heard of. But yeah, so many people forget to customize their settings in their notifications about what they receive and when, and they just leave it with the defaults, which is quite often not the right thing to do, but so many of us do it. Extracting things from your head, like writing a list and making a conscious decision about what to work on next is really good for clearing your mind and getting rid of any of that background worry about what you should be working on or what you're not working on. Sorting out tasks and having a plan of when you're going to do them also helps you from getting distracted and allows you to focus on what the task at hand actually is. So if you do have a lot of email to respond to, that's okay, like that is part of our lives, right? We're not going to get away from that, but plan to complete those similar tasks in a given time frame. Tell yourself, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do my emails now, and then I'm going to move on to something else, rather than doing it constantly throughout the day and letting it interrupt all the other work you're doing. Don't multitask. I think we've talked about this already, but just don't do it. You feel like you're really good at it. I know, I've been there. You're not. Oh, that was really like shouty, wasn't it? You're not good at it. Nobody is good at it, but you feel like you are because of the chemicals that are happening in your brain. And have a routine that works for you. So, me personally, I work really, really well in the morning, and then I slump after lunch. So, sort of 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I really struggle to do any kind of creative work. So, for me, I try to do the sort of big, ugly tasks that I need to do in the morning. A lot of developers and engineers actually find that they work better during the night. And I don't know whether that is because you're actually at your best during the night, or whether it's because that's when the interruptions go away. It'd be interesting to do a test about that. And very importantly, you have to decide what not to do. There's always more information out there. There's always more work that you're not going to get to. There's always more email to read. Not all of it needs to be read, and most of it doesn't even need to be responded to. Decide what you're not going to do, and that will free you up to do the things that are actually important. I'm a big fan of naps. I think nap-driven development should be a thing. But did you know that like a well-timed 15-minute nap can increase your IQ by 10 points? Who doesn't want those 10 extra points? It's well worth a 15-minute nap, right? But seriously, taking naps is just one way in which we can refuel our minds and we can replenish this oxygenated glucose that we're burning through when we're using our brains. So yeah, take naps if you can, because they're really good for you. But if you can't, take regular breaks. Engage in a bit of mind wandering. Get yourself a drink, go outside, whatever. Just make sure you take a break from the work that you're doing. We can only be productive and functioning at our best for 90 minutes to 2 hours at any one time. Any more than that, and your cognitive abilities start to decrease. Taking a break actually makes you more productive as a whole. Don't skip meals. That's an obvious one. Also, don't overindulge yourself either. We talk a lot about 2 pizza teams, and that's not an instruction. Try to eat something other than pizza, please. but yeah, don't skip meals because that oxygenated glucose in your blood, that is replenished when you eat, obviously. You're not going to be at your best if you're skipping meals. Chewing gum is a really interesting one. So it's been shown that chewing gum increases the blood flow to certain parts of your brain that are responsible for not only your attention, but actually creating long-term memories. I know, this is really weird, but chew gum. And yeah, like I said, take breaks and allow yourself time to engage with a different sort of mode of thought. Allow your mind to wander because it's all about balance at the end of the day. We can't be controlling our minds and our attention all of the time. Allow yourself time to relax. Another way that we can allow our minds to relax is by having a hobby. By playing sport or cooking, or for me myself, I like to draw. If I'm drawing, 2 hours can go by and I don't even realise it. And that's really good to replenish your brain, to engage a different part of your brain. And you'll be so much more refreshed when you return to your sort of normal day-to-day life in your job. Does anyone here meditate? Yay, a few people, brilliant. So you already know the benefits. So practicing your focused attention when you meditate makes you more aware of where your attention is. It brings you back into the present. It improves your focus when you're not meditating too, and it actually changes your brain. The areas of the brain linked to the attention and sensory processing are larger in people who meditate. Who doesn't want that? Especially when these systems in your brain are being bombarded day in, day out. So I also want to talk about what we can do for each other, because we're part of the problem. Whenever we send an email to somebody else, we're hijacking their attention. So I want to suggest that if we are experiencing problems with this, that we talk about it. I've never actually been in a business where I've had a discussion about how we communicate. You know, what technologies do we use for what conversations? It tends to be every technology for everything. So we'll send an email and then we'll send an instant message to make sure the person's got the email. And then if the person doesn't respond to the instant message immediately, we might go over to their desk or we'll give them a phone call or we'll try them on a different messenger app. That's not okay. So we need to be a bit more conscious about how we're doing this, and I think having a good conversation with the team and the people you work with about how to use what medium would be a really positive step. Some companies have introduced interruption-free hours, so not just meeting-free hours, but interruption-free hours when we're not supposed to instant message each other, and I think that would be a really positive thing. Flexible working is great. If you're at home and you're out of the office and you're in a quiet environment, or you're working at a time that best suits you, this is only going to be a good thing. You then need to take responsibility of when and how you want to work, but at least you have that control then. We need to think again about open plan offices. I really hate them. They're not a very good idea for developers at all. And we need to be more intentional with how we communicate with people. If we're communicating with people out of hours, what we're saying is, I want your attention right now. Maybe hold back some of those emails until the morning. Do they really need to be sent right now? And now we get to the question that none of you were asking. So what does this have to do with DevOps, Hannah? So the reason I'm here and I'm talking about this is because at DevOps meetups and at DevOps days, and talking with my team about how we work together more collaboratively, we talk a lot about communication. We talk a lot about collaboration, but we never talk about our concentration and how to achieve that focus. And with so many hard problems to solve, we need that. We need the capacity to go and apply ourselves to those problems. So if I was to ask anything of you, I would say, yes, absolutely, like, go away and collaborate and share knowledge, but do it mindfully. Do it in a way that avoids you bulldozing somebody's attention away from the the task at hand and help them to manage their digital lives better. I think what we're doing and the movement around DevOps is incredibly important, but I think we need to be at our best, all of us, to actually make it happen. So that's why I'm talking about this today. And I'd be really interested afterwards to hear your experiences at work as well. That's all I've got. Thank you very much for having me.
Nice one, Hannah. Thank you very much. Has anybody got a question for Hannah?
Oh,
We've got a few. Now, we've got one microphone, so you're going to have to shout. Go.
Earlier, Hannah, you said that developers only get between 90 and 120 minutes to interrupt time. And then later you were saying that the mind finds it very hard to concentrate for much longer than 90 minutes. So do you think that's an artifact of the interruptions, or do you think that's just a hardwired habit anyway? And then later on you said people could draw for like 3 or 4 hours and not notice the time. So.
Okay, yeah. So the study, particularly about this sort of the 2 hours of uninterrupted time, was looking at context switching and task switching. I had a very similar question last time I did this talk, and someone was saying, well, actually, do I interrupt myself after 2 hours? Is that what I should be doing? And it's a really hard one because you have to know what you do at your best. But I would say try to schedule breaks. You don't necessarily want to set an alarm and interrupt yourself, but you want to be aware enough to know that actually you've been going at something for 6 hours and you're probably not functioning at your best and you need to take a break. So I think those were two slightly different things, but they are related for sure.
Next question, over there, in the back. You.
You mentioned putting your mind at ease by doing things like keeping yourself occupied with hobbies. I can't be the only person in the room that's thought, what about the real masochists of us whose hobbies are coding? How do you stop yourself, basically?
How do you stop yourself coding at the end of the day? Oh my god, I don't know, I can't relate to that.
You said that weed was good.
But yeah, I don't know. So, how do you stop yourself from coding? Are you coding on the same projects at work and outside of work?
Personal projects.
Yeah, so I would say that your personal projects are probably engaging a more creative sort of part of your brain. So I would say that was actually okay. If your outside of work projects are burning you out, I worry about why you're still doing them, to be honest. But if you're enjoying them and you're applying yourself to them and you're getting those creative juices flowing, then that's absolutely cool.
Okay, one more question over here, Rory.
More of a remarkable question, but I have noticed this apply more to dev side rather than the ops. And teams before that had more dev focused people. Couldn't be interrupted or they be.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I think that the studies that have been done today in the sort of developer environment now apply absolutely equally to ops. Our ops people are writing code, they're doing infrastructure as code, they're writing tests in the environment, they're using infrastructure in a different way with the cloud. A lot of the tasks that our operations engineers used to do are going away, and they're much more engineering and development centric. So I would say that although these studies were focused on developers, we can quite easily extend that into the realm of operations as well.
Okay, just time for one more. Phil?
So I manage a small team of engineers, and we're operations people really, but we do things like write Ansible and all that sort of thing. So ops is about monitoring alerts coming in. Like I make them all go in hit chat so they can talk to the developers on Slack because we're DevOps. Like how do I resolve that contradiction of needing them to be responsive but also needing to give them this time to concentrate?
Oh, I think it's just about making sure it's rooted to the right people at the right time. I mean, on-call is a really challenging area now because you do need to be responsive, and you don't have the privilege of being able to disconnect and unplug. So it's a really interesting area. I mean, there's a lot of studies around alert fatigue you. I might write a talk on
I
that
read
too
there's
at some
this book
point,
called
but
Deep Work. You read that by Calvin Newport?
I haven't read
Very
it. I
simple
will
sort
now.
of thing, yeah. And I was like, oh my god, I'm not letting my guys concentrate. But
Yeah,
then
yeah.
if I tell them to log out of Slack or HipChat or whatever, then they're not, you know, it's hard. But maybe a rota system or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, passing it around. I mean, even if it's just actually this person fields messages on Slack for like half a day, that can be better than everybody reading every single message on Slack all day, every day, which is what happens a lot at the moment.
Right, okay, Hannah, I think you've earned your nap now. So, thank you, Hannah.
Okay.